I'm Mina, 28 years old. And I never thought my own blood would betray me in the most brutal way possible. It happened at the dinner that was supposed to be my celebration. A dinner in honor of the deal I fought for, the startup I built from scratch, the future I created with my own two hands. But when my father stood, raised his glass, and cleared his throat, the words that came out shattered everything. To my son, Joshua, he declared proudly, the mind behind Rewood Loop, the man whose vision is about to change the world. Applause. Laughter. Glasses clinking. All around me, guests cheered for him, my aunts, my cousins, even family friends who'd known me since I was a child. They clapped like I was just the secretary who booked the caterer, not the founder who had built every line of code, every partnership, every step. And then Joshua, my brother, my rival, stood and soaked it all in. You know, he said, smiling like a king, it wasn't easy leading this project. But I pushed through. I took the risks. I carried the vision. And tonight proves it was all worth it. The room roared. My mother beamed as if he'd just brought home an Olympic gold. My father's hand gripped his shoulder with pride. And I sat there in silence, my heart pounding, my jaw locked, watching my own life's work vanish into his mouth like a story he'd rehearsed 1,000 times. I should have crumbled. I should have stayed quiet like they expected. But I didn't. What I did next turned the room to ice. The applause died. And for the first time in my life, my family looked at me not as the quiet, obedient daughter, but as a threat. Before I tell you what I said that night, I want to ask you. Have you ever watched someone steal your success while the world cheered them on? Have you ever been erased by the very people who should have defended you? Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. And hit subscribe, because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's the night I stopped being their shadow. Growing up in my family meant one thing: Joshua always came first. He was the firstborn, the golden son, the miracle child. My parents told the story at every holiday, how my mother nearly lost him during pregnancy, how he came into the world destined for greatness. They repeated it so often that it became a script. Relatives whispered it like gospel: Joshua, the heir. Joshua, the leader. Joshua, the pride of the family. And me? I was the footnote. The second act that nobody stayed in the theater to watch. As a little girl, I learned quickly where I stood. At birthdays, Joshua's cake towered with 3 layers and sparklers. Mine was 1 layer, sometimes from the grocery store, candles crooked and half-melted. At school plays, when I nervously peeked out into the audience, I saw my father leaning forward with a video camera only when Joshua was on stage. When it was my turn, he was already checking his phone. My mother always had an excuse. Don't take it personally, Mina. Your brother just requires more attention. He has bigger responsibilities. You understand, don't you? I nodded, because what else could I do? But I didn't understand. Not then. By the time I was 10, Joshua had already been put on a pedestal so high he could see the stars. Soccer trophies lined his shelf. Dad's friends called him Little Champ. At family dinners, all conversation bent toward him, his grades, his goals, his latest exploits at the woodworking shop where Dad let him train like a real man. When I tried to share my own small victories, winning the spelling bee, drawing a mural that my teacher hung in the hallway, my father would give a distracted "that's nice" and pivot back to Joshua. The message was clear: I was background noise. Joshua wasn't cruel at first. He was too busy basking in the praise. But as we grew older, he started to enjoy his role not just as the favorite, but as the ruler. If I borrowed his markers, he'd shout to Mom that I ruined them. If I asked him for help with math, he'd smirk and say, "You wouldn't get it anyway." And every time he turned the knife, my parents backed him. Don't provoke your brother, Mina. He's under pressure. He needs space. Space. He got the largest bedroom, a brand new bike, private lessons for soccer. I got hand-me-downs, the corner desk in the attic, and a reminder to be grateful. But the worst part wasn't the gifts. It was the silence. That empty silence when I begged for their attention and they looked through me as if I didn't exist. I remember one winter evening when I was 12. Snow was falling outside, and I sat at the kitchen table with a science fair project spread before me. I had built a model showing how plants could clean polluted air, and I was so proud. I wanted my father's opinion. He walked in with Joshua trailing behind him, still in his soccer cleats. "Dad, guess what? Coach says I might play varsity next year." Joshua exclaimed. Dad's face lit up. "That's my boy." He clapped Joshua on the shoulder. "Knew you had it in you." I held up my project, trembling with excitement. "Look, But he brushed past me. "Not now, Mina. Don't interrupt your brother." That was the moment I realized, if I wanted recognition, I'd never get it handed to me. I'd have to build something so undeniable, so unshakable, that even they couldn't erase it. As the years passed, the gap between us widened. Joshua became the image of the perfect heir, varsity captain, business major, always posing for photos with Dad's arm around him. I became the strange one, the girl who loved computers more than shopping, who spent nights sketching ideas in notebooks instead of flirting at parties. At family gatherings, I heard the whispers. "Joshua will take over the family woodworking company one day." "Mina? Well, she's just finding herself." "Finding myself." That was their way of saying she doesn't matter. I tried to believe it didn't hurt. I tried to bury myself in books, in coding, in late-night experiments with apps and data. But every time I came home, the pattern replayed. Joshua shining at the center. Me, orbiting in the dark. My mother once pulled me aside, her hand heavy on my shoulder. "Mina, don't make trouble for yourself. Just support your brother. That's your role. Every family needs harmony." Harmony. What she really meant was silence. But silence wasn't my destiny. Even back then, I had sparks of rebellion. I joined a robotics club, built a small app that tracked recycling bins in our neighborhood, even won a state competition. I walked through the front door with the medal around my neck, waiting, just once, for my father to beam with pride. Instead, he barely looked up from his ledger. "Does it pay bills?" he asked flatly. "No?" "Then focus on something useful." Joshua laughed. "Come on, Mina. Nobody cares about your little gadgets." That was childhood for me, applause for him, dismissal for me. And yet, every bruise carved out a kind of fire. Each time they ignored me, I sharpened my will. Each time they called me less, I vowed to become more. I didn't know then that this fire would one day fuel a startup, a vision, a future so powerful it scared them. And as I sat there at that long dining table, listening to my father toast Joshua as if he had built my company, something inside me twisted. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the smug pride on my brother's face, it wasn't new. It was the same story I had lived since childhood. The same favoritism, the same blindness. And in that instant I saw it clearly, this dinner wasn't the beginning of betrayal. It was the climax of a script my family had been writing since the day I was born. Because to them, I was never the daughter. I was only the shadow. When I graduated college, nobody clapped for me the way they clapped for Joshua. I still remember standing on the stage, holding my diploma in computer science, looking out into the sea of faces. My parents sat stiff in the second row. My mother wore her pearls, my father adjusted his tie, and neither of them smiled. Not even once. But when Joshua walked across the same stage 2 years earlier with a business degree, Dad had nearly leapt out of his seat, whistling like it was the Super Bowl. That contrast burned itself into me. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I didn't need their applause. But deep down, I wanted them to see me, just once, as more than the afterthought. After graduation, I found myself in a strange limbo. Joshua slipped neatly into Dad's world, managing orders at the family woodworking company. He strutted around the lumberyard in pressed shirts, giving instructions he barely understood, while workers rolled their eyes behind his back. But Dad praised him anyway. My son, the future of Anderson Woodworks. And me? I rented a tiny apartment above a laundromat and lived off a patchwork of coding gigs, fixing bugs for startups, building clunky websites for local businesses, scraping together just enough to survive. It was during one of those freelance jobs that the idea struck me. A client wanted a system to track reclaimed wood, pieces salvaged from demolished buildings and discarded construction sites. The project was small, underpaid, and no one else wanted it. But as I built the prototype, I realized something: the data was gold. Imagine if every offcut, every broken beam, every discarded plank could be cataloged and rerouted into workshops that needed it. Imagine if small furniture makers, carpenters, and eco-builders had a living marketplace that matched their orders with available surplus. Less waste. Lower costs. A circular economy that turned scraps into opportunity. That was the seed of Rewood Loop. I couldn't sleep for nights. My notebook filled with sketches of dashboards, algorithms for predicting usable yield from rough timber, diagrams linking municipal databases with private workshops. I taped sticky notes to my walls until my apartment looked like a conspiracy theorist's cave. Every morning I woke up with one thought: this could change things. Not just for me, but for the way cities handled waste, for the way small craftsmen survived against mass production. But vision alone doesn't pay rent. To build even a modest MVP, I needed resources, server credits, design tools, licensing fees. Not much. Just a few $1,000s to get the first version off the ground. So, against my better judgment, I turned to my parents. I prepared a presentation. I wore my one decent blazer. I even practiced in the mirror, smoothing out the tremor in my voice. On a Saturday night, while the family gathered in the living room after dinner, I pulled out my laptop and began. I showed them the problem: millions of tons of usable wood wasted each year. I showed them the solution: an AI-powered marketplace that matched discarded timber with demand. I showed them the opportunity: lower costs for small businesses, sustainable practices that could attract green grants, a scalable model with national potential. When I finished, my hands were trembling. I closed the laptop and waited. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then Joshua chuckled. So, trash tinder for lumber? He smirked. Cute. Dad leaned back, unimpressed. It's a hobby, Mina. Not a business. Nobody pays for scraps. Serious people build companies around solid assets, not garbage. My mother sighed. You've always had imaginative projects. But maybe it's time to think realistically. Joshua is already helping with the company. You should consider joining him. Work together. That's where your future is. I swallowed hard. I'm not asking for a job in the lumberyard. I'm asking for a small loan. Just a few thousand. I'll pay it back. Dad's face hardened. No, Mina. We've invested enough in your experiments. If you want to play at being an inventor, you can do it on your own dime. The conversation ended there. No discussion. No encouragement. Just dismissal. I wanted to cry. Instead, I packed up my laptop and left without another word. But that night, Joshua knocked on my door. He leaned in the frame with that infuriating grin. You really think you're onto something, huh? I crossed my arms. I know I am. Well, he said slowly, lucky for you, I've got some cash saved. Tell you what, I'll cover your little expenses. In return, you make me a partner. The word hit me like a slap. Partner. He hadn't written a single line of code. He hadn't stayed up all night researching municipal contracts. But in his eyes, handing me money made him the owner. I should have said no. I should have walked away. But desperation speaks louder than pride. Rent was due. My credit cards were maxed out. My savings were gone. Without those funds, the project would die before it even began. So I agreed. A handshake. A wire transfer. No contracts, no signatures, no legal clarity. Just the promise that we'd be partners. I told myself I could manage him. That I'd stay in control because the vision was mine. That someday, when the company succeeded, he'd thank me for letting him tag along. But deep down, a knot of dread coiled in my stomach. I knew my brother. I knew the way he took credit for every team project, every small win in school, every little thing that made him look good. And now, I had given him a direct line into the one thing that mattered to me most. Still, I worked. I buried myself in code, in spreadsheets, in late-night strategy calls. Weeks bled into months. The prototype took shape, a clean interface, a predictive engine, a pilot database. Kyra, my closest friend from college, jumped in to help with outreach, cold calling small workshops and persuading them to test the system. There were nights I collapsed at my desk, waking up with keyboard imprints on my face. There were mornings I walked into work dizzy from exhaustion, surviving on coffee and raw determination. But every milestone lit me up from the inside. The first matched order. The first workshop feedback, this could save us thousands. The first time I watched the algorithm successfully calculate usable yield from a pile of broken beams. I was building something real. And yet, every time Joshua stopped by, he'd ask one question, so when do I get to pitch it? Not how's it working? Not what do you need? Just when do I get to stand in front of people and take the credit? At first, I laughed it off. But the more I worked, the clearer it became, this wasn't just my brother helping. This was the beginning of a storm. Because I had built the fire. And he was already reaching for the torch. The company grew slowly at first, like a seedling pushing through stubborn soil. Our first order came from a small carpentry shop in Somerville. They needed oak planks but couldn't afford premium suppliers. Through our platform, they found a contractor across town willing to unload reclaimed beams for half the price. When the workshop called to thank us, I sat at my desk shaking, hardly able to breathe. It was the proof I had been waiting for. Rewood Loop wasn't just a dream scribbled on my wall. It worked. Soon, more workshops signed on. Some were cautious, skeptical that digital girls could manage the realities of timber supply. But when their orders matched, when their margins improved, the skepticism melted. We gathered testimonials, short notes filled with gratitude. This saved our shop from closing. Finally, someone cares about small craftsmen. I printed them all, pinning each one to a corkboard above my desk like proud parents hang drawings on the fridge. Every word was a reminder, this was real, this was alive. While I poured myself into code and contracts, Joshua's life followed a different script. He married Claire, a sharp-tongued woman who entered our family like a queen claiming her throne. She had the kind of smile that looked warm in photos but cut like glass in person. She criticized everyone except Joshua, and somehow, that made my parents adore her. Finally, my mother gushed, a daughter we can be proud of. I sat in the pews at their wedding, clapping politely, invisible as always. While they exchanged vows beneath a chandelier, I thought of my servers humming in a data center, of Kyra cold calling another workshop that morning, of lines of code waiting for me to debug. My marriage was to the work. My vows were written in algorithms and user feedback. Less than a year later, Claire gave birth to a son. My parents nearly lost their minds with joy. They crowded the hospital room, cooing and weeping, as though this child was the savior of the family legacy. My father held the infant like he was cradling the future itself. Our heir, he whispered. The next Anderson man. The celebration lasted for weeks. Neighbors brought casseroles. Relatives visited with gifts. Every dinner turned into an altar to baby Daniel. Claire sat smug in her chair, glowing with the power of being mother to the crown prince. And me? I wasn't invited to that spotlight. No balloons, no casseroles, no champagne. But I had my own child. Rewood Loop was crawling, then walking, then running. Every week brought new signups. Kyra and I built a feedback system, sending surveys, recording calls, tweaking features late into the night. Our baby learned to stand on its own. I remember one morning vividly. I opened my inbox to find a message from a mid-sized furniture studio. Your system cut our costs by 22% this quarter. We'd like to sign a yearly subscription. I sat there stunned, hand over my mouth. A yearly subscription meant stability. It meant someone believed in us enough to commit long-term. I felt tears blur my vision. It was as if the child I had raised in secret had just spoken its first words. But when I tried to share my joy at Sunday dinner, the room barely paused. "That's nice, dear," my mother said, bouncing Daniel on her knee. "But did you hear? Claire's already lost all her baby weight. Isn't she incredible?" Joshua smirked across the table. "And the shop just landed a new client thanks to me. Real business, Mina. Not just apps." Laughter followed. My cheeks burned, but I swallowed it down. Because I knew something they didn't, my so-called app was no longer fragile. It was growing, and soon it would tower over the tiny world they worshipped. That year, we onboarded 10 workshops, then 20. Partnerships with demolition crews expanded our database of salvaged wood. The algorithm grew sharper, predicting usable yields with uncanny accuracy. Investors began circling, sending cautious emails, asking for meetings. Kyra and I were exhausted, sleepless, but electric. Every small victory was a heartbeat. Every new client was a breath. Rewood Loop wasn't just software anymore. It was alive. And while my parents rocked a flesh-and-blood grandson, I rocked my laptop at 3 a.m., whispering to myself, "This is my child. This is my future. And unlike theirs, mine cannot be stolen so easily." Or so I thought. The first email didn't look like a miracle. It was a short note from a city procurement officer: "We've been following your pilot results. Could Rewood Loop handle a district-wide rollout for municipal salvage?" I read it twice, then a third time, my pulse climbing. A district-wide contract meant exclusive access to the city's stream of deconstructed timber, schools being renovated, warehouses coming down, old storefronts stripped to their bones. It meant data. It meant supply. It meant that for the first time, we wouldn't be begging workshops to try us, they'd be lining up because we'd control the river. 2 days later, before I could swallow the reality of the first email, a second one hit. A national home goods brand wanted a pilot for a reclaimed line, coffee tables, shelving, accent walls, sourced through our marketplace with full traceability. If we could deliver consistent volumes for 3 months, they'd go nationwide. Not a vague promise. A conditional agreement, dates and volumes spelled out, pricing pre-approved. Real money. Real headlines. I sat in the dark with both messages open, the screen lighting my face, hands pressed to my mouth to keep from screaming. I wanted to call someone. I wanted the sound of another heartbeat in the room. I called Kyra. We didn't speak for the first 10 seconds, we just breathed, listening to each other's shock. "This is it," she whispered. "This is oxygen." "It's weather," I said, almost laughing. "We've been living in a drought and someone just opened the sky." We went to work. The city wanted a demonstration of throughput and compliance, chain of custody, environmental reporting, labor safeguards. The brand wanted consistency, quality, and a narrative they could sell, from forgotten bean to living room table. We tuned the algorithm, built a compliance dashboard, drafted training for new demolition partners. I slept 2 hours a night and dreamt in JSON. I could have kept it quiet. Waited until the ink dried, protected the newborn from curious hands. But the little girl in me, the one who used to stand in the doorway with a science fair project and hope, wanted to be seen. Just once, let them hear good news and look at me like I mattered. So I made a mistake. I went home. They were in the kitchen, my mother at the island arranging tulips, my father reviewing invoices, the baby's toys scattered like bright landmines across the floor. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and roasted chicken. For a moment it felt almost safe. "I have news," I said, the words wobbling on their way out. "Two pieces. The city wants a district-wide contract with Rewood Loop. And a national brand is offering a pilot that could go nationwide." Silence. Then my mother's face lit with relief, the kind you reserve for disasters narrowly averted. "Oh, thank God," she said, glancing at my father. Joshua really needed this. The old script snapped into place so fast it made me dizzy. "Joshua?" My father closed his folder slowly, measuring me. "He's been working hard to get your little project noticed, Mina. The calls he's taken, the introductions he's made. This is precisely why family matters." I stared at them, the tulips, the invoices, the years between us. "He didn't get these." "I did. They emailed me." "Well, of course they emailed you," my mother said, as if humoring a child. "You're listed on the website. But this kind of opportunity, this scale, happens because a leader opens doors." Leader. The word hung in the air like a verdict. Joshua walked in then, phone in hand, sleeves rolled to his elbows like he'd been moving mountains. He kissed my mother's cheek, nodded at my father, then flashed me a smile. The kind of smile that says I'm already 10 moves ahead of you. "Heard you dropped by," he said. "Good timing. I've just been on with a friend at City Hall." "A friend?" I repeated. He shrugged. "Well, Dad's friend. But you know how it is. Relationships." I told him we were scaling, that we had developed the sourcing model to handle municipal streams without contamination issues. He glanced at my father, pleased with himself. He said procurement's been sniffing around for a while. I guess someone finally decided to reach out. I felt the floor tilt. They reached out because of our pilot data. Because of my calls. My reports. My work. "Language, Mina," my mother said gently. "There's no my in family. There's ours." "Ours?" The word slid over my skin like oil. Kyra called later. I took the call outside, cold biting my cheeks. She could tell from my voice. "How bad?" "They've decided he opened the sky," I said. "Then you put the clouds on paper," she replied. "Everything. Timestamps. Emails. Chains of custody. Don't argue feelings. Argue facts." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I could feel the old ache in my chest, the one that had lived there since childhood. But under it, something harder. Something that didn't shake. Over the next week the ground shifted in small, noticeable ways. Joshua started saying we more often. With me, with vendors, with the brand. "We're excited to scale our model." We always planned municipal integration. We anticipated corporate demand. He asked for the deck to tighten the story. When he sent it back, my name had slid from founder and CEO to head of product. "A mistake," he said. "A formatting error." He promised he'd fix it before the meeting. He began introducing himself to new partners as co-founder. It wasn't technically untrue, that was the poison in it. He had given me money when I needed it most. A wire transfer and a handshake. A flimsy bridge I'd crossed because the water below me was rising. He wore that bridge now like a crown. I kept building. I pulled together compliance protocols for the city, wrote memos on traceability for the brand, rehearsed the demo until I could run it in my sleep. Each night I exported PDFs and emailed them to myself, to Kyra, to a private archive. Chain of title. Not just for wood. For work. There were emails I wasn't copied on. Meetings that appeared on my calendar without context. My father hosted a lunch for stakeholders at his office. I wasn't invited. Joshua posted a photo afterward, him in a blazer, hands on the back of a chair, the caption "Big moves ahead for the family business." Not Rewood Loop. The family business. I wanted to storm the comments, tag the city, the brand, attach my documents, my sleepless months, my proof. Instead I closed my phone and kept breathing. The brand visit came first, a small delegation in expensive neutrals, white sneakers that had never seen sawdust. I guided them through the demo, the dashboard, the live traceability. This beam came from a school in Ward 4, this batch from a mill teardown out west. They nodded, impressed, asked real questions, wanted to see the pilots in person. Joshua stood close to me at the screen, echoing my words a beat later in a deeper voice, as if translating me for an adult audience. After they left, he clapped me on the shoulder. "Great job," he said, like a boss praising an employee. "I'll handle the contracting on this." "You'll handle it?" I said. "With what authority?" He smiled, unbothered. "The authority that gets deals done." The city walkthrough was next, this one on their turf. Hard hats, reflective vests, a wind that cut through our jackets. I answered questions about contamination, transport, storage, the algorithm's thresholds. The procurement officer, sharp eyes, no patience for fluff, looked pleased. When she shook my hand, she held my gaze. "Look solid," she said. "Send your draft timeline. We'll move to committee." Joshua leaned in for his handshake and said, "We built a strong team here." We. Always we. That night I opened a bottle of warm soda and sat on the floor of my apartment, back against the couch, the ceiling a blank sheet above me. I thought of the little girl at the kitchen table with her science fair project. I thought of the teenager in the attic, drawing mock-ups in a notebook no one would ever ask to see. I thought of the woman in the mirror, smoothing her blazer, swallowing hope like a pill that never dissolves. That night I didn't cry. I reduced the chaos to proof. In a single memo titled Chain of Ownership, I stitched the trail together, repo snapshots and timestamps, trademark and domain records, the municipal emails, my signed IP assignment to the company, and Joshua's wire-labeled loan beside his chat, "Pay me back when you can." I sent it to Kyra. She wrote back 3 words, "Build the record." 2 days later my parents invited me to dinner. "Just family," my mother said brightly, the way she says just lie down, it won't hurt. "We want to celebrate this wonderful momentum." I knew what the dinner would be. The guest list would be larger than just family. The brand contact would be there, or someone who plays tennis with someone who funds them. The city councilman would make an appearance, all teeth and promises. The neighbors would bring wine. My father would clear his throat. And Joshua would stand to receive what I had grown. On the afternoon of the dinner I printed one more set of pages, the quiet kind of armor. I slipped them into a simple folder, timestamps, registrations, signatures, pilot reports, a 1-page memo labeled Chain of Ownership, rewood loop with my name at the bottom. I put on a simple dress. I tied my hair back. I looked at myself in the mirror and thought, they will not make me a ghost in my own house. I arrived to the hum of conversation, the chandelier's glare, the smell of roasted meat and expensive wine. Kyra texted me, "You've got this," and I slid the phone into my bag. My mother kissed the air near my cheek. My father squeezed my elbow like a warning. Joshua floated through the room collecting compliments, his pocket square folded like a flag. I took my seat at the long table and placed the folder by my plate. The deal had changed the weather. The drought was over. But the lightning was still to come. The applause doesn't end. It rolls like surf against the long table, breaking over crystal and china while my brother basks in the glow of a life he didn't build. My father's hand is still on Joshua's shoulder, my mother's eyes are wet with pride. The procurement officer from the city smiles politely. The brand rep leans toward him, murmuring something about vision. People turn to each other and say, "He's so young to have done all this." I feel the folder by my plate, my neat stack of proof, timestamps and registrations and signatures. Paper. Facts. Truth, pressed flat. And I realize, all at once, that paper won't touch this room. This room is theater. This room runs on story, on who dares to claim the microphone first. If I stand and read receipts, they'll nod, they'll smile, and they'll decide I'm emotional. The tide will roll back to him. To them. So I do what I built this company to do, remove the illusion and reveal the structure. I slide my phone under the linen, the screen a low glow against my palm. My thumb finds the admin icon by muscle memory. A prompt blooms, compliance lock, chain of ownership in dispute. The system I designed for audits and legal holds, for the day a partner demanded proof that the data belonged to us and not to anyone else. It's not destruction, it's a vault door. A door only one person can close and open. A second prompt, rotate keys. Suspend replicas. Enter phrase. I breathe out the word that no one at this table knows but me. My passphrase. The thing I chose on a night I couldn't stop shaking, when I decided my work would never be taken from me by a smile and a story. I press confirm. Across the room, the projector screen behind the bar flickers. The live dashboard we set up for the guests, order flow, reduction metrics, that hypnotic map of beams moving across the city, stutters, then clears to a white banner. Maintenance mode, chain of ownership validation required. At first there's a ripple of polite confusion. Then the investor in the navy suit tilts his head. The brand rep blinks. The procurement officer sits up straight. Joshua laughs too loudly. Wi-Fi, he says. You know how these old houses are. He pulls his phone, swipes, fails to hide the sharpness in his eyes. He types. He waits. He types again. The banner doesn't move. My father's smile tightens. Joshua, he says, still easy, the way you ask a waiter for more wine. Joshua steps away from the table, brings the city officer into his orbit with a sleeve and a practiced grin. Just a hiccup on the mirror. The core system is solid. He taps, calls up an internal page, breathes relief, and then swears under his breath before replacing it with a chuckle. He's in the wrong place, all the doors he knows how to open lead to lobbies. He looks at me. I sip my water. The room is adjusting to the new weather. Conversations drop. The kitchen doors stop swinging. Somewhere, a baby toy pings and then goes quiet, as if it, too, wants to hear what happens next. Ladies and gentlemen, Joshua announces, voice bright and commanding, give us 2 minutes and we'll have the demo back. These things happen when you scale. He nods toward me, magnanimous. Mina will refresh the product view. I don't move. He lowers his voice without lowering his smile. Mina. Now. I set my napkin beside my plate. You refresh it, Joshua. A hairline crack appears in his expression. Don't be childish. I turn to the procurement officer and the brand rep, the only people in the room whose reactions matter. I speak clearly, evenly, not loud, just true. Our system has a compliance lock, I say. When there's a dispute about who owns the code, the data, or the brand, it enforces a hold. It's designed to protect our municipal partners and our customers. Tonight, I activated it. A hush like snow. My father pushes back his chair. What on earth are you doing? What you should have done, I answer. Verifying the truth before selling a story. Joshua laughs again, brittle at the edges. She's emotional, he says to the officer. We've been under pressure. Family dynamics. You understand. He taps his phone, talks fast. I'll just bypass the. You won't, I say. You don't have the phrase. You don't have the keys. If you built it, fix it. Right here. In front of everyone. Silence pulls long and tight. He looks at the banner. He looks at me. He looks at the procurement officer, who is watching him the way you watch a suspect at an interview. My mother's voice is sugar over knives. Mina, darling, this is not the time for. This is exactly the time, I say, and there's no shake in my voice. You've told this room that Joshua built Rewood Loop. That he led it. That he opened the sky and made the rain. Good. Then rain. Joshua's jaw flickers. This is a tantrum, he says, and the word is so practiced it almost works. Of course I can fix it. He gestures toward the screen, toward me, toward the shape of a thing he has never touched. We just undo whatever. The lock rotates the encryption keys, I say, still to the officer, still to the only witnesses who matter. It disconnects read replicas, retires API tokens, and pauses task queues so nothing corrupts. All the data is safe. But without the keys, it's unreadable. Without the architecture, it's just metal. Give him the keys, my father orders. Right now. No, I say simply. He takes a step, and the temperature in the room changes again. Old heat. Old rules. My mother's hand catches his sleeve. The brand rep clears her throat. Who is your chief security officer? I am, I say. The procurement officer nods once, the slightest flash of approval in her eyes. A lock like this is standard for municipal systems. The question is governance. She turns to Joshua. Who holds the keys by policy? Joshua tries on another smile and finds it doesn't fit. We're dynamic. Early stage. We. Who, she repeats. Mina does, he says finally, like spitting out a stone. I let the room breathe that in. This is outrageous, my father says, finding his footing in anger. You will unlock this system at once. You are humiliating your family. I'm protecting your partners, I say, and I look at the officer and the brand rep again, offering them the thing they actually need, competence. If there's confusion about leadership, we pause. If there's a challenge to ownership, we verify. That's how you keep a city safe. That's how you keep a supply chain honest. The officer's mouth twitches, almost a smile. Joshua's mask is peeling. You think you've proved something? He hisses. You've proved you're willing to burn your own house down. I shake my head. I haven't burned anything. I've shut the door. If you built the house, open it. He glares at the screen as if he can will the banner away. Fine, he says, louder. Give me a terminal. You'll what? I ask, and my voice is gentle now, almost kind. Recreate the architecture? Rebuild the matching engine? Rehydrate the indices you don't know exist? Call the workers you've never met and explain where their orders went? A murmur from the far end of the table. People who came to drink and toast are adjusting to the possibility that they've been cheering for a costume. I turn my folder, the paper I thought I'd need, and slide it a fraction closer to me, but I don't open it. I don't have to. The room has already read the only page that matters. Unlock it, my father says again, low and lethal. I meet his eyes. Under one condition. We correct the story. Publicly. Tonight. We file the governance policy tomorrow morning. We send the city and the brand the signatures they need. If not, I walk, and the lock stays. You can start from zero. You can build what you say you built. This is extortion, he snarls. This is accountability, I say. The procurement officer folds her hands. From the city's perspective, she says carefully, we require clear ownership and security controls. Ms. Anderson, she nods to me, your lock is appropriate. Mr. Anderson, she nods to Joshua, your role should match the documentation. The brand rep exhales through her nose. We care about delivery and PR, she says frankly. Right now, one of you looks like a builder, and one of you looks like a spokesperson. We prefer builders. A long, terrifying quiet. I can hear the hum of the chandelier. The baby toy pings once, tentatively, as if asking permission. Joshua looks to my father, waiting for the old magic to work. My father looks at the room and calculates. My mother looks at me like she's never seen me before. I reach for my water and let the silence do what no paper ever could. Finally, Joshua speaks, each word scraped on the way out. Congratulations, he says to me, without looking. You made your point. No, I say softly. My work made it. I stand, lift the phone, and enter the phrase again. The banner disappears. The map blooms back to life, beams moving like constellations, orders threading through the city, the dashboard counting quietly upward. The applause that follows is smaller, scattered, uncertain. It's not for Joshua this time. It's not for me, either. It's for the return of the show, for the relief of motion. But underneath it, something else has shifted. A story has lost its crown. I sit. I fold my napkin. I feel Kyra's text buzz against my hip, nice shot. I don't smile. I don't look at my father. I keep my eyes on the screen, on the work, on the thing that will still be there when all of this ends. Because tonight I didn't win an argument. I reset gravity. And when the people who believe the costume look up and see the builder, they never quite see the costume the same way again. And by morning, the terms would be sitting in their inboxes, either they sign, or the lock stays. Your move, visionary.